Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Hilarious Vicious, and as I promised earlier, I was going to make a build video, so here it is. It did take me a little bit to kind of get this build put together. I've been experimenting with a lot of different sets, and this build has worked the best for me. So I'm going to go ahead and release this build video for you guys. It relies mostly on stats, not on procs or anything like that. There's a little bit of procs here and there, but it's nothing like like the current meta. So if you're looking for a build that relies more on stats rather than procs, I highly recommend this build to you. I'm gonna of course provide an in-depth look into the build and also provide alternatives for you guys. Now with that being said, if you do enjoy the video, which I hope you do, I highly recommend that you do give it a like, and if you're not subscribed to my channel, I do highly recommend you do so, as that will help my channel grow and will allow me to continue releasing more ESO related content for you guys. And with all that being said, I really do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to provide any kind of critique or commentary down below. I always welcome people's input and critique for my builds, my theory crafting, and even my gameplay altogether. I always welcome it. It helps me improve as a player and as a theory crafter. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy this video. Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Hilarious Vicious. So, if you saw from my intro video, this is my new build for the Markarth patch for Templar PvP. So, this is mainly a solo build. It's meant to have high damage, high survivability, and a respectable amount of resistances, both in crit resistance and in physical and spell resistance. This build is, like I mentioned just a second ago, it's best for solo play. You could run this in small groups, or you can even run this in bigger groups if you want, because the damage potential of this build is pretty good. You can actually hit With continuous attack, you can hit 6k, a little under 6k, but even without it, you can still hit like 5.5, 5.6, depending on if you make any modifications to the build or not. So, with that being said, let's get started. So we're gonna go ahead and start off with the with just the stats real quick. So, one thing you'll notice is the health on this build is very low for the current meta. So a lot of you are aware, if you know, a lot of you are pretty much aware that a lot of people in Cyrodiil are running around with between 28 to 36k health, if not more. I try not to stack too much health, not because of like, not because of survivability or anything like that, but like for me, this build is a little bit old school, because I try to have like my ratio for resources be what it would have been maybe like a year or two ago. You want to have, for me, I always feel comfortable with 30k plus stamina. With all my builds, I always try to maintain at least 30k stam. And with my health, so it does say 19.8k, but in Cyrodiil this goes up to 26.5k at least. And for me, I feel like I can survive in that. When I don't survive, when I get killed out in Cyrodiil, 9 times out of 10 is because I'm getting zerged down. So even if you have a lot of health, you're gonna get zerged down, you're gonna die anyway, so I don't see any point of overstacking health. I try to have a healthy balance of my resources. I don't want to run around with like 25, 26k stam. Not because I can't sustain it, but I just don't feel comfortable with that type of resource pool. Now as for my magicka, it is a lot lower than in my old builds. In my old builds I would have 14k, 15k, but that would be because of spring-loaded infusion. In this case, I'm not running that food anymore. I'm running a different food, and I'll show you guys here in a second. But with this resource pool, I can manage. I can manage most of my fights, most of my solo fights and engagements and whatnot. So I feel pretty comfortable with this. As for my sustain, I have 535 magicka recovery. This is fine because I don't use magicka a whole lot. I only use it to like purge. Actually, no, I'm lying. So I do have a lot of magicka abilities, but I barely use them all together. So whenever I use one, I'll wait a couple seconds and then use another one, and so on and so forth. And it works fine for me because I'm not spamming magicka abilities too much. So it kind of just balances out pretty well. The health recovery on this is 772. So unbuffed, like this actually ramps up. So this, I do have a bit of health recovery, and it does ramp up a bit. You'll see here in a second how it does that. But 772 unbuffed, like this is it's not bad. It's good. It's free healing, so can't go wrong with the health recovery. And then my stam recovery is 1133. It is a little bit on the lower end for my builds, but I can manage with this. Normally I run around like 1200, 1300. This does ramp up with a couple other buffs, which I'll show you guys here in a second. But overall, with these resources, I can sustain pretty good. Unbuffed, I do have 31.5% weapon crit. So, and it can ramp up to over 40%. And I'll show you guys here when I show my buff stats. And then 3,300 weapon damage as well, unbuffed. So, and then unbuffed, I also have 16k spell resistance and then 13.6 physical resistance. It is a little low, but it does. I'll show you how you can actually get this. You can actually get this maxed out. I am actually able to hit hard caps with this build, and I'll demonstrate to you guys how I'm able to later on down the road. And then 3,500 crit resistance. I feel like I am overstacking crit resistance just a little bit, but that's because my build's not fully complete. I do need to transmute a couple pieces to reinforced. But other than that, these are pretty much my soft stats. And 64 points of stam, of course. I feel pretty comfortable with this build. And with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about what sets I'm running, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so we're going to talk about gear. So with this build, it is a 5 medium armor build If you want to, you could run heavy armor with this. That's up to you, as your preference. I personally like medium armor because it gives me that extra damage, crit, and stam cost reduction that it offers. So we're going to go ahead and start off with our first set, which is Armor of Truth. Armor of Truth gives you line of crit, line of stamina, and line of weapon damage. And then the proc itself, whenever you set a target off balance, it gives you 440 plus weapon damage. If it's all golded out, it's 460. So I've been using this set for the last almost 2 years now. I've always been able to keep this up like 99.999% of the time, because how way it works. And I mentioned this in if you watch the Reman's Truth build video, I actually demonstrate that you can actually you can reset the timer on this, because look at the wording. When you deal damage to an enemy who's off balance, so it'll proc when you hit them. If they're off balance and you hit them, it'll proc the set, right? So every time you hit them, if you're jab channeling, it'll reset the timer. So you can actually keep this buff up and running for between more than 10 seconds, at least 15 seconds. You're gonna be able to keep this up for like 15 seconds at least, because the way that off balance works, they're off balance for a couple seconds. So as long as you keep hitting them, or if you hit someone else, like if you're 1vxing, if you hit someone else, you're gonna have Truth up like almost the entire fight. So it's a really good set. In my opinion, it's probably one of the best sets for 1vx. But it's a really dependable set, and I use this in most of my builds, except for like a couple. But you know, I highly recommend this set, even in today's meta where everyone's running Eternal Vigor and what have you. It's a really strong set. Now, the second set is actually Briarheart. So Briarheart gives you 2 lines of crit, 1 line of stamina, and then it gives you 440 weapon damage, 440 something when it's all golded out. But for me, it's 435. So I get 435 weapon damage for 10 seconds, and there's only a 5-second downtime. While it's up and running as well, you do get a heal whenever you crit. And with this build, it's a high crit build, so you get a lot of healing. You're gonna get a lot of natural healing. You don't have to like worry about your crit being at a decent level. You're over 40% crit with this build, so you're gonna be critting pretty often when Briarheart's procced. You're gonna be healing pretty often when Briarheart's procced. Excuse me. And even when it's not up, you have Truth up, so your weapon damage is gonna be consistently above 4.2k weapon damage. But when you have both of them up and running, it's gonna be easily hit over 5.5. So I feel like these 2 sets synergize really well, because if one's always up. Truth is 90, like Truth is usually up, and then when Briarheart's up, you do even more damage. So they just work really well together. That, and I like having a good stam pool. Like I mentioned, I like having a really strong stam pool. I have 32k, so it really helps with my power to light and just overall damage. Now for my monster set, I am running Troll King, and this is a medium and light. I get the light shoulder for the max undaunted bonus of 6%. With this build, I am planning on going all tri-stat glyphs. Not all of them are tri-stat yet, but it will be. So my stat pool is going to change a little bit in the future, but this is pretty much your stat pool is going to look like with this build. Troll King, this stacks with my food buff, which is Artaeum, because this is what I'm using for this build, is Artaeum Takeaway Broth. It gives you max health, health recovery, stam, and stam recovery. So this can actually ramp up to about 2,500 health recovery with the potion and Troll King. And if you run Repentance, it can go up a little bit higher. If you don't want to run Troll King, you could always run Engine Guardian. Engine Guardian's a really strong alternative. And funny enough, I've actually been using Bloodspawn. That ulti gen that you get from Bloodspawn, you really notice it. You get your ults up a lot quicker. It's the resistance bonus that you get is not as strong as it used to be, but Bloodspawn is still pretty good. It's still a pretty good set. I'm seeing a resurgence of it more. Like I'm seeing a couple more people running it more now. So it's low key a sleeper monster set. It's not as strong as it used to be, but it's still pretty good. So I highly recommend that monster set as well. Those are pretty good alternatives. Now for my traits, I am running all Impen. However, this is going to change. My big pieces are going to be reinforced, so I can get extra resistances. And then these 3 are going to stay Impen. I'm going to go well fitted on the shoulder for that extra roll dodge cost reduction. You could stay all impen. All impen works too. Or if you want to go like well fitted, like you want to go like all well fitted and like some impen, you can do that too. My preference though, for me personally, I am gonna be running three reinforced, 3 impen, and 1 well fitted. And I think with that, that's gonna help me a lot more in the future. Now, as for my jewelry, I am running 2 protective so I can get more resistances, so I'm not too squishy. They did nerf protective a lot over the last like year and a half. It's not as strong as it used to be, but it still doesn't hurt to have that extra 2.3k resistances. Doesn't hurt. You know, never hurts to be tankier. And I do have robust. You could go infused. You can honestly go triple infused if you feel like you don't need the resistances, or you can go like triple infused, double infused, 1 robust or 1 protective or 1 triune. I like robust because it keeps my stamp pool to a certain point, to a certain level, which helps power to light. You could go infused as well. That's your preference, but for me, I'm gonna stick with this setup. I'm gonna go double protective, 1 robust. Now, as for my 2-handed weapon, I do have True's front barred, not back barred. So with the weapon, you could run an axe. I run the axe for the bleed because it really helps with pressuring weaker targets. And the thing about 1vx is you're gonna be fighting a lot of weaker opponents, and even for stronger opponents, this helps as well because it just gives you that extra bit of pressure that you need to take down stronger opponents. So it's good for puck stomping, and it's good for fighting more competent targets. If you feel like you're lacking damage, like in general, you could always run a sword, or if you feel like you need that pen, you could always run them all. Me personally, I've ran all 3, and I like each one, and I just alternate between them. Right now, I'm just running an axe, and if you haven't tried the axe, I highly recommend it. Like that bleed is actually pretty good. Now for my back bar, because I am running sword and board, I am running the master sword and board, and what it does is it's pretty much like a blood spawn but built into sword and board. What it does is it gives you 6.693 health, but like obviously battle spirit, you know, that's pre-battle spirit, so it drops down a bit. And then the amount that you heal, you get that in resistances for physical and spell resistances, and it's 5 seconds long. So the lower your health is, the less you overheal. So this is really good. It's really good for a burst heal like rally and master sword and board. And on top of that, if you get like a really good heal, you get like a lot of resistances. With the master sword and board, I'm actually able to hit hard cap for resistances, which is about 33k. So this helps with the heal. It makes me tankier, and because it's a sword and board, I get tankier just because it's a sword and board. I have a sword and board back bar setup. For my poison, I do have a double hot poison. So the double hot poisons, I can double dot, but it doesn't last as long, but it gives you a heal. So you can actually stack this with Vigor, Extended Ritual, what have you, and it just gives you a lot of healing potential. If you feel like you don't need that though, you could always run a Minor Brutality poison, or you can run a double dot poison, or any kind of poison at all. It's really up to your preference, but I just think the Drain Health poison really stacks. It just synergizes really good with Master Sword and board. And now with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and cover our skill setup. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and cover our skill setup. So we're going to start off with our front bar. So with my front bar, I am starting off with my primary offensive buff, which is Rally. If you don't want to run Rally, you can always run Forward Momentum, but you're going to miss out on a lot of healing. So with Rally, what it does, it gives you Major Brutality, increasing weapon damage by 20%, as well as giving you Minor Endurance. Minor Endurance did get buffed, it's no longer 10%, it's 20% now, so it increases your stamina recovery by 20%. On top of that, the longer that you have this buff active, the stronger the heal becomes when you reset the buff. So it's really good for a burst heal, or if you just need to top off on your health. Highly recommend it. It's really good. It's really good. Really strong in solo play. Now my next skill is Biting Jabs. I'm not gonna explain this too much. It gives you a 40% snare on your targets. And on top of that, it does give you Major Savagery, which increases your weapon crit by 2600, which is roughly a little over 10%. So it just makes you crit more often when you use this, and it lasts 8 seconds. So there's a lot of plus sides to using this skill. It can be hit or miss when it's laggy. I mean, literally hit or miss when it gets laggy. But overall, this is the go-to skill for any Templar. Now with my third skill, I do have Executioner. Now with Executioner, this is preference. I treat this more as a flex. There's a lot of Templars who don't like using Executioner or Reverse Slice, which is its other morph. Personally, I like using it because there are times where I fight really stubborn opponents, like they're really tanky or they're actually really good and they're healing and stuff. And there are times where like they get really low and you just want to use this. So it's really good for taking down more stubborn opponents or even squishy targets, because like there are times where you just like you do like one jabs and then light attack and an execution and you're dead. So it really helps with conserving your sustain. It really helps with conserving your stamina. But if you don't want to run that, you could always run Repentance or just like a different any other skill really. Me personally, I just like running Executioner. Now as for my primary CC, I am running Toppling Charge. It's a gap closer plus a CC. It also sets my target off balance, which makes it easier to proc Truth. So you know, it is a magical based ability, so it doesn't hit as hard. If you want more damage out of your CC, you could always run Binding Javelin, or with some modifications, you could even run Reverberating Bash. You could also run Turn Evil from Fighter's Guild, which is it's a fear trap. So me personally, I like running Toppling Charge because it's always good to have a gap closer, especially when you're chasing down like really slippery targets. It really helps, especially right now when everybody's running around as a Nightblade, or as a Stand Blade, Mag Blade, what have you. So when they're cloaked, it lets you really stay on them. But whatever works for you. Just me personally, Toppling Charge is my go-to. Power to Light. So Power to Light, they get a bit of a nerf because it was overperforming. I don't know if it was overcalculating or if it was like actually overperforming. I don't remember specifically. However, the reason why I run a lot of stamina on my builds is because Power to Light is I use Power to Light a lot. The tooltip on Power to Light is based off stamina and not weapon damage. So that's why I like having about over 30k, a little over 30k stamina, because I'm able to hit, you know, I'm able to hit between 18k, 19k tooltip. Pretty much how this works is like 20% of the damage that you do it in a 6-second window. When you activate the skill, it gets reflected back on them. So it really helps with pressuring your target or even with burst. So I highly recommend the skill. Not just that, it does apply Minor Breach, which is they did merge Fracture and Breach, so it's Minor Breach now. But it reduces your target's resistance by about 3k. So it makes your target a little bit squishier. It gives you that extra delayed damage. It really helps with pressure. I highly recommend it. If you don't want to run this, you could always there's always other alternatives. To me personally, I like running Power to Light. And then of course my front bar ulti is Dawnbreaker Smiting. So Fighter's Guild ulti, it gives me an extra 3% weapon damage when I have it slotted. But if you don't need that, you could always run the two-handed ult, or you could run the Aedric Spear ult, which is Powering Sweep, or you could run the other morph. It's really up to you. Me personally, I've been using DB since I started like PvPing in the game, so it's my go-to ult, and I'm just gonna keep using it. I do alternate between the ults. It's just, you know, but I do primarily use Dawnbreaker, and I highly recommend it as a good front bar ulti. Now for my back bar, I am running a Sigil Order skill known as Race Against Time. It gives you Major Expedition for 4 seconds, Minor Force for 12, and it also removes all snares and mobilizations, and it makes you immune to them for 2 seconds. So 2 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but it helps. It's not so to prevent getting snared. It's more so to like remove it. If you want to be more proactive with snares and stuff, I do recommend running Shuffle. I just like running this because it gives me a lot. It gives me so much. I get so much from one skill. But if you feel like you don't need those other buffs, you can always just run Shuffle or Elude. I just like the Major Expedition in particular because that's really good in open world when when you need to line of sight, or you need to like kite or straight just get out of a fight. It really makes a big difference. Now for my second ability, I am running Ransack because I am running Master Sword on board. This does proc from this skill. If you're not running Power to Light, you could always just run Pierce Armor because it applies Major and Minor Breach. But if you're running Ransack, it does give you Minor Protection for 15 seconds. You do get 6 seconds from using jabs or any Aedric Spear ability. But the 15 seconds, it's a lot longer. So in my opinion, it's a better source of Minor Protection than jabs. It doesn't hit very hard anymore, but it's still good to like weave it in. On top of that, it does proc your Master Sword on board, and you can even proc your poison. So that being said, we're gonna move on to our next skill, which is Vigor. So Resolving Vigor, the tooltip on it doesn't seem very high, but like I said, you know, I'm not fully buffed yet, so you're not really gonna see the Vigor tooltip. how high it can get a lot higher when I'm fully buffed, and it can get even more buff when I'm by a keep, because I do have a combat medic under support, which gives me a 20% boost to my healing when I'm by a keep. So Vigor's pretty much your go-to heal over time. Then you got Extended Ritual. Extended Ritual is your purge. It's your source of purging debuffs. On top of that, it does apply a hot. So if the hot's really good, especially like if you're in a tight quarters area, like if you're in Imperial City, if you're fighting in a bridge, or you're fighting on a resource tower or on a keep tower. You can stack that with Vigor, your healing poison, your Master Sword and Board, and your rally. It gives you that extra bit of healing that can really come in handy in an outnumbered fight. And then your primary, of course, your primary buff for defense is Restoring Focus. It gives you Major Resolve, and on top of that, it gives you the equivalent of 480 stam recovery, which really makes a difference for sustaining. So I highly recommend you try to keep this buff as close to 100% uptime as possible. And then as for my back bar ult, I am running Spell Wall. You can always run Remembrance, but personally, I love Spell Wall. Or you can run Undo. But with Spell Wall, especially right now, in this current meta where you see a lot of players running gank builds, like proc builds, gank builds, what have you, a lot of those builds are projectile based. So what happens is, if you drop this, for 7 seconds, they're going to end up hitting themselves. So under the right circumstances, you can actually use this as an offensive ult, because you just drop this, and they'll start hitting you, and they'll end up hitting themselves. So they'll end up doing the damage. They'll end up hitting themselves, and you start hitting them. So it's a really good ult. I've been having a lot of fun with Spell Wall. There are fights where like people would kill themselves with their own abilities, and it's just funny to watch. So it's a really good ult. Highly recommended to have as a back bar. Very solid, very dependable. So with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and cover our CP. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and cover our champion point allocation. So we're going to start off with the Steed. With the Steed, I am running 61 in Ironclad, which gives me a 21% damage reduction to direct damage. So one thing about champion points I'm going to suggest to you guys is you want to stay as close to a whole number as possible, because the way CP works, it rounds down. So if you're at 21.4, 21.7, guess what? It's going to be 21. Even if you're over 5, it's going to round down anyway. It's something that I've noticed how CP works. It's really weird. It's been like that for years. I think it's been like that ever since CP came out, period. But that's just my little tip to you guys. So I'm running 61 in Ironclad, which gives me 21% bonus to direct damage reduction. And I am running 55 in Resistant, which allows me to hit over 3k crit resistances. Obviously, with the build, when you make adjustments, I do recommend to try to stay at around 3k crit resistances, which might mean adding more points to resistant, or if you're going more in pen, you could take points away. I am overstacking, so you would take points away, but once I make my modifications to the build, that 55 will be optimal. I'll be at 3.1 last time I did my calculations. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to the Lady now. So with the Lady, I have 49 in Hardy, which reduces physical, poison, and disease damage by 11%. Pretty much any kind of stand-based damage by 11%. And then Elemental Defender as well, 49 points, which reduces all Magicka-based damage by 11%. It was 56 for that 12%, but what I did is I took points away from those two, and I allocated them into Thick Skinned. Because of the proc meta, there's a lot of damage over time right now, so I put 37 points, which gives me a 15%. Normally I'm at 11% here, especially when dots got nerfed about almost 2 years ago, but now because of the proc meta being a thing, Thick Skinned is going to be a really strong CP trait to have, like really high. If you're able to go higher, I recommend you do so. But for me personally, 15%, that's pretty much like the sweet spot for me. But if you want to go higher, you can. Also, you get a pretty good perk from having 120 points on the Lady. So when you CC break, your next stam ability is 80% cheaper. So if you CC break, you can either rally or you can use a Vigor, either or you can use Ransack. Though I don't see any point in that because Ransack's already really cheap. Now with the Lord, I do have 19 points in quick recovery, which gives me 5%, 5.2% extra healing received. So this does mitigate the battle spirit reduction. It pretty much evens it out now because it's no longer 60%, it's 55%. So this pretty much sets it back to pre-Greymore. You could always put more points into this. You could put less points if you feel like you don't need it. But for me personally, I like having quick 5% in quick recovery. I just like to even that out, so I can survive like I used to back in the pre-Greymore days. Now we're gonna go ahead and go over to pretty much the stand base CP. I got 51 into Warlord, which makes it 19% cheaper to break stuns, and then 33 points into Sprinter, which gives me a 19% cost reduction to sprint. It just really helps with kiting. You're gonna be sprinting a lot, especially if you're playing solo or if you're getting into solo play. Just know that you're gonna be sprinting a lot, so you're gonna need these two. These two are really important for PvP. Now for sustain, I am running 64 points into Mooncalf, 43 in Tenacity. This used to be 56, but I reduced it because that 2% was marginal at best. And I put some of those points into Healthy, which gives me a 4% increase in my health recovery. So this will help with my with my Troll King proc. But the big one here is the big thing about having 120 points in the Lover is wind running. So wind running increases your movement speed by 2%. That counts just standard running, walking, and even sprinting. And then that is weird. That is a weird error message. But your health and magic recovery is actually increased by 20%. Last time, was it 10% or 20%? I don't remember exactly, but your health and magic recovery is increased when you're sprinting, and I'm pretty sure it's 20%, if I'm not mistaken. And if I am, feel free to comment below. Just let me know. Thank you. All right, and then we're gonna move on to the Shadow. So I have 51 in Tumbling, which makes roll dodging 19% cheaper. This does stack with the medium armor passive and well fitted. And Shadow Ward, which reduces cost of blocking by 6%. So for me, blocking on my Sword and Board is 42% cheaper. It definitely helps. It's just a little side note, you do get Merchant Favored, which reduces repairing your armor by 10%. It's like if you're PvEing, but like this is a PvP build, so it doesn't really matter too much. But if you get 75, you do get nicer things, but it's a little side note, you know. So now we're gonna move on to the blue, the Magicka base CP. So in Apprentice, I have 19 points in Blessed. This gives me a 5% bonus to my healing. Like I said, this is going to even out the battle spirit, so I'm back at 50% cost, 50% healing reduction. So this helps with just having like consistent healing on my tooltips, especially in open world where all the bonuses come in. Now with Atronach, I have a full 120 bonus, and I have that by having 81 points in Master at Arms. This increases my direct damage abilities damage by 24%. This is biting jabs, burning light, D-swing, anything that's instant damage. Master at Arms buffs it. It's a 24% buff, so it's pretty solid. And then I got 39 points in the physical weapon, so this makes light and heavy attacks 22% stronger. So it really makes your weaving, your light and heavy attack weaving, would do a lot more damage. So it really helps with your combos and your bursts and just overall just pressure. I got Tactician. Most importantly, 120 in Atronach does give you a Tactician. So whenever you roll dodge an attack, your target is set off balance. So it makes it easier to proc Truth. Highly recommend you have 120 in Atronach. And I have the Ritual as well. So with the Ritual, I have 51 points of Precise Strikes, meaning that I have a 19% bonus to all my crit damage. And that also stacks with the 10% that I get from Adric's Spear. So that's 29%. With Minor Force, you get 39% because that extra 10% from the buff from the Minor Force. So you can do a lot of damage when you crit. I also have 56 points into Mighty, which increases all my stand-based abilities. damage by 12%, including the bleed. And speaking of bleeds, I got Thaumaturge at 23, which gives me a 10% bonus to my dots, meaning my double dots or my double hots, and my axe bleed. And oh, and my Dawnbreaker. The dot from your Dawnbreaker also benefits from Thaumaturge. If you feel like Thaumaturge isn't worth it, you could always put that into piercing to get that extra bit of a physical penetration. But honestly, that's up to your preference. Or if you feel like you don't need as much crit, you can always just drop a couple points here, put that in here, and you can get a bunch of physical penetration. Having 120 also gives you access to the Last Stand, which gives you major heroism when you get really low. And also Exploiter, which you do 10% more damage to your off-balance targets. So this stack's really good with Tactician. When you set them off balance, you do 10% more damage, plus the debuffs from Minor Breach and Major Breach. Just makes your targets a lot squishier. They did nerf Perfect Strike by making it going from 9%, it's 3% now, 3% extra weapon crit. But they did make up for it by adding that extra 6%. They added it. I'm pretty sure they added it to the Major Savagery because I know they did buff it quite a bit. Also, Opportunist. A lot of people don't realize how strong this is. So, if someone's rezzing someone and you interrupt them, you bash them, you do 10%, you do 15% more damage, and on top of that, they're set off balance. So you actually do 25% extra damage, not counting any debuffs. So it's pretty gnarly. And that pretty much covers my CP. If you have suggestions for my CP, feel free to comment down below. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at the build when it's fully buffed. So just with Major Brutality alone, I'm 3350 back bar, 3876 front bar. Now we're going to go ahead and get Truth and Briarheart procced. So with Truth, Briarheart procced along with the Berserker Glyph, we're looking at 5643 weapon damage on our front bar, and our weapon crit is 43.5%. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at our tooltips for Biting Jabs along with Dawnbreaker Smiting. These are pre-follow-up buff from the two-handed passive. And then now we're going to go ahead and take a look at our back bar. So with the back bar, it's with full buffs and without Minor Mending, which is 21k Vigor. With Minor Mending and First Aid, the numbers will be significantly higher. So now we're going to go ahead and discuss the stats on the build once it's fully buffed. For defense, we'll Major Resolve, Troll King, Master Sword and Board, what have you. So we're going to go ahead and cover Troll King first. So I have my guildie here is trying to get me low. I'm going to go ahead and proc Troll King, and I'm also going to drop a potion to get that Major Fortitude buff. So with Major Fortitude, along with Troll King and Artaeum, I do hit 2.4k health recovery. So it's a pretty good amount, and it allows me to survive a lot of damage that I take, especially in outnumbered fights. Along with 1600 stam recovery with the potion buff, not counting Battle Rush from kills. Now to demonstrate the resistances for this build, I do hit 29k spell resistances along with 26k physical. This is just in the duel outside of Cyrodiil, so this does affect the stats on the build. If you're in Cyrodiil, you do get that 20% for combat medic when you're by a keep. That does affect the proc. Not just that, if you're in a group and you have a source of Major Mending, that can also affect how much healing you get from Master Sword and Board. Do keep in mind the amount of resistances you get is based on how much you heal from the proc itself. So this can actually get a lot higher, especially if you're running like that Resistance Mundus Stone, or if you're going 3 protective, or even if you're running a defensive set, or if you're running this in 5 heavy. If you do run Bloodspawn with this, you can easily hit. You should definitely be able to hit over cap without much of a struggle. But overall, you're expecting to receive between 28 to 31k with Troll King in resistances. But if you hit Bloodspawn, you'll definitely hit cap. Alright guys, so this is pretty much the build. Right now with the current state of the game, we are in a proc meta. Proc metas are always hard on players in general, but especially on players who try to go for stat dense, stat based, skill based builds. It can get pretty annoying. I definitely understand that. Now if you're trying to find a build that is stat based, this is a pretty good one. Or if you're trying to compare your build with my build, that's fine too. Either way, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you have any comments or critique, or you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. I also do have a community Discord. With the community Discord, you could go in there, Theorycraft. You can ask me some questions, keep track of my content, because I am planning on sticking around and producing more ESO related content. I do have plans on expanding my content towards other classes. I have a lot more time to do that now, so I'm gonna go ahead and start getting into that. Or if you just want to chat with me, Discord's the best way to do it. You can contact me directly, or you can talk in my Discord chat. I also have a Twitter. If you have a Twitter, feel free to follow me there as well. I'm thinking about streaming again as well. So Twitter is another good way to keep track of my streams and whatnot, or just my content in general. With that being said, if you liked the video, obviously hit the like button, help me with that YouTube algorithm. And if you subscribe to my channel, I'll greatly appreciate it. It means a lot to me. I am trying to grow my channel out, and it'll definitely help me with my content creation. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.